complicating weather in the United States after South America and renewed the crop estimates for the U.S. crop right here on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. So, hello, Jerry. We are going to talk about several issues today, including the South American weather and your own estimates. But let's start by talking about the complicating weather in the U.S. It sounds like several states are getting drier.
Oh yeah, the U.S. Weather situation. The market seems to take the old attitude these days that if it's going to be warmer and less rain, that's going to be a positive, and that's for the crop to get in. Now, yes, I think there will be some a pickup in corn and plantings this coming week in the eastern corn belt. I am not so sure though that anything is going to happen in the northern plains, where there's lots of optimism of both corn and soybean plantings to be increased significantly. Actually, North Dakota here, we're talking about in 800,000 to 850,000 acres each of corn and soybeans to be planted. Last year, we didn't get those planted, and that was a bigger factor. And it depends a lot more on how quickly the snow melts and what kind of rains we had. Last year was ugly up there, and it prevented a lot of plantings. The other twist of this thing is that the dry weather that has really put the initial initial hard red wheat crop conditions at its lowest since they really started this process back in 1989. 28% good and excellent, and that is a very onerous situation with limited rains, virtually no rain in the hard red wheat areas of the Southwest and Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. Now, there's eastern parts of those states are doing better, but that's not where the wheat is. So the interesting situation here on U.S. weather is that we've got a lot of things bouncing around here, but going into a long weekend like we're here at the Easter holiday here means that things can change, and at the same time, a lot of times investors decide to be on the sidelines, and that's part of the reason why we had kind of a sluggish market here on late this week because of it. But there's still a lot of uncertainties, particularly in South America and other places, and so let's take a bite on that.
Yeah, so basically the USDA attaché in Paraguay has reduced the crop in Paraguay to the drought in anticipation of what the USDA officially might say later. But still, Paraguay will have a good crop, but it seems they will likely to supply Argentina with all the processing industry will demand there.
Right. Well, that's the thing. Part of Paraguay's production goes down the Paraná River and goes into their soybean processing facilities there along Rosario and on to Buenos Aires, and the other big talk was, and still I think is going to be a factor, is that a pretty good sized chunk of Brazil's exports, maybe as much as 5 or 7 million metric tons, could be shipped back into Buenos Aires here to try to keep that very important soybean processing industry to going. Because if it doesn't, then that potentially means we could have more exports of meal out of the U.S. And that the one thing is interesting in here, we've potentially could have some additional meal exports just because we're going to utilize more of our soybean oil into the expanding renewable diesel industry. And I just saw another update here just the last day or two here about expanded U.S. Soybean processing of maybe 700 million bushels. And so that means that's to meet this West Coast mandates about expanded renewable diesel. And so now what do we do with the meal? So it's going to be getting things more complicated around the world here with Argentina want to end up having their meal industry continue. And the one twist of it that also got people scratching their head is that the bonus areas government decided to offer out another soy dollar program to run from I guess this weekend, early next week, all the way through May. And to some extent, that's an interesting twist. If they offer that, they get type things that suggest that you should be exporting the thing. But some people are saying they might divert that into the domestic meal industry. But that means that their cost of operations is going to be higher. So that's another twist. There's a lot of currents going back and forth along with the size of the US the crop down there and how the USDA looks at it. We're going to get those updates on Tuesday.
Yes, and we have new numbers from Jerry. He will have new estimates about the U.S. plantings, and you're saying that the surface will be even bigger than the 90 million acres that was previously projected.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing is that the March 31st planning intentions and quarterly stocks, of course, the planning intentions are just intentions, and we kind of alluded to the fact that there's lots of optimism in the northern plains, and that the government survey of producers up there really were optimistic about a big return of the 2 million to 2.5 million of prevent plantings in the northern plains, because, well, even more than that, I think it could be closer to 4 now that I think about it, and that because of excuse me, the very poor weather we had last year. Now the biggest question on this is will we get the same thing going? I was a little more cautious on my number at 90.9, 90.8 acres, and that kind of where the trade average guess was going into these numbers. The twist of it is that unfortunately those numbers that came out in planning intentions will be the USDA's benchmarks for the May updates. Now, we will not see these planning intentions numbers being involved with any of the supply demand numbers that we will get on Tuesday. There's still old crop, and the new crop scenarios won't come out until they do their first initial worldwide numbers on the May, I think it's 12th date at this point. And so, but it's always important to look at those numbers. And to some extent, on the corn side, the 92 million number they have makes things kind of lackluster there, the possibility of any real change and actually an increase in carryover stock for the coming year. On the opposite side, the beans unchanged number was the opposite situation, particularly with I think a realistic 52 bushel scenario and that. And so in reality is that actually when you start to look at the latest quarterly stocks numbers, which were the other big factor that came through on this March 31st data, and that was the fact that the carryovers, the March 1 stocks ended up really significantly large at this point for this date. The 154 million number is just slightly higher than last year's number, and also it's probably the highest we've had in probably 4, 5, 6 years. And so that suggests that maybe the USDA's crop size for last year is going to be reduced. Now, originally the 57 million difference was pretty hefty. But there had been some adjustments in some of the statistics there where the exports actually moving out of the country were about 22, 24 million higher. And so I reduced my expectations down to about a 32 million adjustment. Now, that's kind of an interesting one in itself. The USDA's timing on putting together that number, suggesting a smaller crop size, they could wait a couple months on that. But I think it's something that's important to understand. It's out there, and that's why I put it in my latest updates on the 23-24 crop size on beans. I think that's the one real feature that's going to be watched closely is, will the USDA step up? They might end up actually just increasing exports by 10 million or so. The trade actually is anticipating a number slightly below 200 million, down from 210. And that might be all we see. And my number expectations might be a couple months away. But I really feel like that the current discrepancy between the usage numbers we have and the current stocks numbers suggest that there could be an overestimate of the crop and a smaller U.S. Crop size, which will tighten up our carryover stock as we go forward. On the soybeans, on the corn side, the real twist on that, looking forward, is the reality of how many acres of this 92 million will really get planted, and maybe even how much the drought might impact plantings in the Southwest. Kansas plants a lot of corn these days, and right now, at least, they might not plant as much if this drought continues into June at this point, because they don't like to end up planting their corn really past the middle of May here. It's only, for practical purposes, 4 to 5 weeks ahead, and that partly because the fact that the heat situation during the summer could be detrimental. They might be switching over to sorghum versus corn on this situation. So that's another feature we got to watch for going forward. But a lot of different twists and turns here in these USDA plantings and stocks reports.
Now, what are you seeing as the impact of this price-wise?
Well, the last day or two, we really weren't paying attention to what the numbers might say on Tuesday. We're always looking out the window and say, oh, we're going to get all this stuff planted and that. So the speculators went to the side. I kind of feel like this market's still going to be chopping back and forth and watching U.S. weather, of course, and how things progress. Next week's planting progress on corn was only 2% last week, and most of that was in Texas. And so I don't know, we might end up doing 4 or 5% nationwide. Most of that's going to be in Illinois and Indiana, maybe a few spots in Iowa, but minimal stuff in the Dakotas on corn and Minnesota and even Nebraska, I think, at this point. So that's something to keep in. That will be the first thing that we'll see when we get back on Monday afternoon. From there, and in the statistics for Tuesday, the other interesting thing that just popped up in the last, even late yesterday afternoon on Thursday and into today is that things have started to really get exciting in the wheat market here about the Ukrainian shipments of rail shipments into Poland and Romania. The Poles have decided they're, even if there's some issues where their ag minister resigned, and there seems to be a lot of confusion between the producers and the shipments of these things in. Unfortunately, they haven't moved as quickly into ports and be out of into the world markets. They've kind of sat in those Romania, Poland, Hungary, things like that. And so it's causing lots of consternation about that. And that really is complicating the wheat market a little bit and concerns in that. And the other quick turn on this thing, I saw this since the trading ended is that somehow or other the Russian inspectors are not looking at the boats that need to go into Odessa to take grain out. Now, I'm not sure that means they don't care and they can still move them, or that means that nothing's moving in to those ports so they can actually fill them up. That's another misinformation situation that's going on here. So lots of things in the wheat market, along with its weather situation, is part of what's going on there in the wheat market. To some extent, U.S. weather and the Black Sea situation continues to be a big factor there. On the corn and soybeans for the coming week, as I said, I think the South American weather, South American crop sizes, by the way, will be important. That's another thing that will be coming out on Tuesday, is the fact, will the USDA go down as low as 25 million as some people have in the beans? Will they go down to 35 or 34 million from 40 million on corn? Right now, at least, there seems to be some stability that happened over the last 10 days, 2 weeks. And attitude down there probably is much to do with the fact that the damage is already done. So there isn't a lot of additional things. There really hasn't been that much rain down there in Argentina, but that's the other feature we got to watch and see how that, because if we don't have stuff in South Argentina, that means more demand potentially coming back to the U.S. Of course, our friends in Brazil are going to try to pick up as much of this business as they can. But right now, at least, there's lots of balls in the air. We'll have to see how the numbers come out on Tuesday.
All right. Thank you very much, sir.
You bet. Have a good holiday, and we'll be back at it next week.